I am so excited to announce that I have released the first official tarot diagnosis spread book. Tarot and Self-Discovery is a therapeutic tarot journey with over 200 spreads, including over 152 card prompts and over 50 robust tarot spreads. You can purchase a physical copy on Amazon or a digital copy at thetarotdiagnosis.com. You are listening to The Tarot Diagnosis. I'm your host, Shannon. I'm a licensed psychotherapist, and I also happen to have a love for tarot. Each episode, I invite you to reflect with me as I work to demystify the tarot and the human experience, all while exploring tarot's connection to mental and emotional health. While this podcast may feel therapeutic, it is not meant to take the place of psychotherapy. So grab your cards and join me as I work to create a pathway to better understand ourselves and those around us. A few weeks ago, I released the 150th episode of the Tarot Diagnosis. It was a significant milestone that I celebrated quietly and in grateful contemplation. There's a few of you that have been around since this podcast's inception, and you've really experienced the ebbs and flows and changes and growth over the last 3 years. And for that, I am so incredibly grateful. I wish I could give each of you a hug for finding value in this work. And then there's also so many of you who are newer listeners. Maybe you just discovered the podcast over the last year or so. And I am really excited that you've found my little corner of tarot, psychology, and mental health. It means a lot to me that you want to listen in these podcast episodes and send me emails or DMs on Instagram about your listening experience. I really enjoy engaging with all of you, and you make this work even more meaningful. I feel like I've reached the point where I feel like I can say I have friends or at least acquaintances literally all over the world, really thanks to this podcast and this incredible community of folks who are so interested and curious and dedicated to really understanding themselves and their relationships and just the world around them. And so with all of that said, I feel like I've been finding myself at a crossroads lately, not like with the podcast or the community, really. I feel really grounded and grateful and inspired by that. But there's so much that has happened in my life just over the last year and a half that I'm honestly surprised hasn't sent me spiraling into the abyss. And I mean, to be totally honest, there absolutely have been days where, I've been kind of curled up in the fetal position, crying so many tears that I'm wondering how this much fluid is able to escape my body. But amidst all of the obstacles, there have also been really sweet, tender glimmers of reprieve. I have, a small group of friends who have really shown up for me in ways that I don't even think they realize. And what's also wild is there's, some of you who are listeners or supporters of my work and have, reached out to me to share, how this work has impacted you. That has also really kind of held me and acted as a balm in many ways. And, not many people know the magnitude of what's, transpired for me. And it's not even just one thing. It's a lot of things that have happened over the last year and a half. So to feel seen and cared for, even in a small way, has been so comforting. And I'm saying all of this because it's interesting. So since the beginning of this podcast journey and really creating the tarot diagnosis, I've always struggled with defining what my boundaries are. And that's been an interesting journey in and of itself, because for the most part, I've maintained pretty professional boundaries. I feel like I've always treated this space similarly to how I treat my therapy practice, where, self-disclosure is limited and really only if it might benefit the client, or in this case, you all, the listeners or community members. And I mean, I've definitely, like, as I've grown in my career, I've been in the counseling profession to some degree for well over a decade now. Like, self-disclosure is definitely something that, I will lean into if I feel like it's therapeutic and beneficial to the relationship. And it's just fascinating because with the podcast, like, I have the ability, well, the podcast and this community, really, I have the ability to share more. And sometimes I want to share more, but I've started to realize that my profession as a psychotherapist has really ingrained such an intense stigma against self-disclosure that I think it's actually kind of negatively impacted my already rampant and maladaptive hyper-independence. Because there is this kind of gnawing ache sometimes to, not even sometimes, actually the majority of the time, to keep things to myself, because I'm so kind of contained to this idea or this narrative or identity, really, that I am supposed to keep things to myself because my role is to hold space for others and to take care of others and to be, a sounding board and a healer and someone who's supposed to just listen to other people. So to ask others to hold space for me is terrifying. And then to allow other people to hold space for me is equally, if not more, terrifying and incredibly uncomfortable. And this might sound really weird coming from a therapist, someone who's very much, obviously supposed to encourage, and I often do, sharing kind of what's happening and allowing other people to take care of you. And this is, don't worry, something that I have absolutely been exploring in therapy for years, and something that I am constantly working to break down. And we all know that progress is not linear. There are times where I do share and I really allow myself to take up space and I allow other people to hold space for me. And I feel proud of my progress. And then there are times where I kind of revert back to old ways of being, which is so natural. And I think something that all of us are very familiar with. And lately, I feel like the more I don't share kind of what's happening in my inner world or even with me emotionally, to me and around me, I feel like I'm being hypocritical. I'm always advocating for people to share and seek support and welcome help from others. And to not give myself that same permission is asinine. And that's something I'm going to make sure I'm actively working on, over this next year, is to be honest about what I'm experiencing. And I have found, like, I do this in my therapy practice sometimes, like if I'm kind of having an off day, but I'm well enough to do my job, I will tell clients, hey, I'm feeling a little off today. However, I feel like I have the capacity to show up for you. I just want to let you know if I don't seem quite totally myself, that's why. And I use this as an opportunity to model that level of transparency. And I find that sometimes those sessions are sometimes the most rewarding because I'm not asking, obviously would never ask a client to caretake me in those situations. I tell them what's going on and then we quickly move on. However, it gives them permission to use that same language instead of leaning into hyper independence or leaning into, I can't tell anyone that I'm having an off day or that I'm not feeling great. And it allows us to really hold on to and embrace our authenticity more. Because when we're not doing that, that's when everything kind of gets stuffed inside. And it's like, it's like that junk drawer, or some of us who have a junk closet. Thankfully, I just have a junk drawer, no junk closets right now, where we just like shove shit. And it just like, the more stuff we put in and don't neatly organize it, the harder it is to either open or close it once we try to like get in there and like rummage around to try and find something we're looking for. The same thing happens to us mentally and emotionally. But when we identify what's going on and we name it and we point it out and we can set it in its place, then it's easier to kind of open that door or drawer and look around for what we need. So yeah, this is something I am actively trying to do more of. And let me tell you, sometimes it is absolutely physically painful. And I know many of you can relate to this because actually it feels very like when we feel like we have to hold everything into ourselves and not share, it can feel very like Four of Pentacles meets Four of Swords, actually, in a way, because it's almost like we're supposed to hold tightly to our own experiences and reflect or isolate or cope privately, which is where kind of that Four of Swords comes in. Especially those of us who feel like we're the rock for many people in our lives, or feel like we need to have everything figured out or put together or be in control, or for those of us who identify with hyper-independence. So yeah, here I am stepping into an era of more vulnerability. And I really hope that those of you who are listening, who might be experiencing similar things that I am, allow yourselves to be seen more and step into this new year kind of honoring and embracing that level of vulnerability too. And because today, the day I'm recording this, is the winter solstice in the Northern Hemisphere, I figured I would lean into my goal of becoming more open and vulnerable by sharing with you all my personal solstice/birthday reflections, because my birthday is the day after the winter solstice. But fun fact, if you're a member of my email list, then you actually have already read my reflections because I emailed them out right away after I pulled cards and recorded as a way to hold myself accountable. So yeah, I'm recording this and then immediately writing up my thoughts and sending it to you so I'm not sitting with it and second guessing myself. And in these days, I really love the fact that my birthday and the solstice are so close together, because I really use it as a time to reconnect and honor the solstice and reconnect with nature and really reflect on this last year of who I was, who I am, and who I'm becoming, which is the foundation of the spread that I'm pulling cards to today. And I am inviting all of you to sit with me while I reflect on this last year of who I was, who I am, and who I'm becoming. And while you're sitting with me and listening to me pull cards, I'm actually going to encourage you all to do the same. Grab your deck and shuffle and pull some cards for who I was, who I am, and who I'm becoming. So I'm using, per usual, my Tarot Vintage deck. Though I recently did acquire some new decks that I I'm going to be diving into later this month that you'll probably see on Instagram. So the first card I'm going to be pulling to is Who I Was. All right, we have Judgment reversed. So those of you who have been following my work for a while know that I don't necessarily intentionally read reversals. However, when I pull a card, whether it's upright or reversed, I love thinking about every meaning, facet, and energy aspect of that card. So yeah, if a card comes up upright, but based on the question or whatever I'm feeling or thinking or whatever comes up for me, maybe it sounds a little more shadowy and vice versa. So yeah, so Judgment reverse, let's get into it. So for much of my life, I have wrestled with being a people pleaser, and seeing Judgment reversed feels kind of like I'm staring directly at that struggle and what that's like. Because despite what many of us people pleasers think, and as well-intentioned as we may seem or feel, something that we often don't realize is that people pleasing is actually a covert form of control. And coming to terms with that truth and that narrative took me years to really understand and accept. You know, when we play the role of the, quote unquote, yes person, and we are bending and contorting ourselves to meet the expectations of others, we think we're being kind and accommodating. And sure, we are actually being kind and accommodating, But something that's underneath all of that, if we were to pull back some layers, is actually us trying to control outcomes and other people's feelings in order to create a sense of safety. And that is something that I absolutely resonate with as a people pleaser. The fear of saying no and disappointing someone can feel so destabilizing that I would rather set myself on fire in order to keep other people warm. But the truth is, no matter how much we give, no matter how many times we try to please, or how many times we do set ourselves on fire to keep other people warm, there are always going to be forces beyond our control contributing to any given experience that we're having or feeling or thinking. And the only thing truly within our sphere of control is how we choose to respond to what happens in any given situation. And I feel like in this case, Judgment Reverse serves as a reminder to myself and to all of you that relinquishing this illusion of control isn't a weakness, isn't necessarily something to fear, and won't have this scary outcome. If anything, it provides us a sense of freedom. And as always, I welcome anything that you all have to add to these interpretations. All right, I'm going to move on to the next card in this spread, which is who I am. So this is more, so that was who I was. And sure, yeah, like Judgment Reverse, people pleasing, absolutely more of something I was in the past and still struggle with to this day, but it's definitely getting better. I've experienced a lot of freedom in kind of speaking my truth and, saying no, for example, or, that's not something I want to do, or not a conversation that I want to have, or yeah, just like being able to listen to what truly will fuel me versus what will deplete me, and honoring that has been incredibly freeing. So anyway, who I am. That's what we're going to pull for next. So kind of who I am now and the energies I'm navigating. So this is 10 of Pentacles, also reversed. And this feels appropriate for who I am because I have been in the midst of some really significant death and tower moments that have significantly rattled my familial foundation. So this card and just this archetype as a whole absolutely feels fitting for this point in my life and who I am now. I had a vision, a very carefully constructed narrative of what my life and my future were supposed to look like. And we all do to some extent. And when we create these narratives and these stories, we craft these mental blueprints that allow us to kind of navigate and know how to move forward and backwards and sideways. And by creating these stories and these blueprints, it's as if whatever we've created is inevitable, unchangeable, absolutely certain. But then reality hits, life happens, aka Judgment reversed, and exploring what we can control versus what we can't. And then suddenly this script and this that we've written in this blueprint that we've designed is torn to shreds, ripped to pieces, and we are left kind of grasping at fragments of what was, trying to make sense of what's next. And sometimes it's for the best, sometimes it's not. And I think that's important too, because it can fall into the category of toxic positivity when we say things like, oh, everything happens for a reason, it's all for the best. Sure, some things are, but not always. And it's absolutely okay to say, this fucking sucks. This is terrible. This is not what I wanted. This is actually not for the best, but I have no choice but to start writing a new narrative with the hopes that this one will lead to feelings of contentment and wholeness and solace. But, let's be honest, starting over with, something that, we've clung to for so long is terrifying. It's that kind of fear that is raw and demands this kind of like guttural courage. and also a dose of creativity and a hell of a lot of faith in yourself and your abilities. All right, let's pull another card. So this is the final card in this reflective spread. And this is who I am becoming. Another reversal. This time, King of Cups. So who am I becoming? The King of Cups reversed. So when I think about the reversal of the King of Cups, I think about the shadow of this card, and the shadow being emotional restraint, and it feeling and acting as a mirror, really reflecting back to me those people-pleasing tendencies that were highlighted by Judgment reversed, really. And thinking about this card reminds me of an essay that I wrote in grad school. And I talk about this essay a lot, and I think that speaks to really how profound it was and just how much of an influence the prompt of this essay had on me. And we were asked to explore all of the unhealthy reasons we wanted to become a therapist. And for me, it was clear I wanted to fix my family. That was my unhealthy reason. But there was more that I wasn't aware of until way later, well into my career. And that's when I realized that holding space for others' pain allowed me to avoid confronting my own pain. And despite being in and out of my own therapy for, well over a decade, this pattern of avoidance has been a long-time companion of mine and something that I think is absolutely worth detaching from as I move forward. And what's interesting is thinking about this reverse King of Cups as emotional restraint. I have absolutely allowed myself to cry more lately than I have cried in years. And I think that's a marker of progress. But I do think that there's still a long way to go, especially with myself somatically and doing more and leaning more into somatic healing, which very much feels like this King of Cups energy. Another component here, especially because this is a reverse King of Cups, so I think in terms of who I'm becoming, I think it maybe is more of a nod to shedding that shadow of the King of Cups because, a big part of my personal growth that I want to experience is pushing myself to share more openly and vulnerably. And even just sharing this publicly with you, and then I will be sitting and writing up my reflection and sending it, which you all, if you're on my email list, like I said, have already read. Even though it might be a small, deliberate step, it is still a step towards allowing myself to be seen. And I think that's pretty significant. And to relate this back to the King of Cups, especially the reverse King of Cups, I think it's also important to reflect on not keeping this emotional rawness perfectly contained, but being willing to let it spill over and allowing that spillage to be witnessed by others. And this archetype very much feels like a reminder to keep showing up authentically, even when it's messy. So that is my 2024 reflection. My hope for all of you in 2025 is that you also give yourselves permission to open up more vulnerably to those around you and allow yourselves to be seen, loved, and accepted in all of your forms of pain, joy, excitement, and messiness. Thank you so much for listening to The Tarot Diagnosis. For more tarot and mental health content, follow The Tarot Diagnosis on Instagram. You can also subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode, and sign up to receive the Tarot Diagnosis emails, where you'll have access to exclusive spreads and exciting announcements. To join an incredible community of tarot and psychology enthusiasts, join the Tarot Diagnosis membership community, The Symposium, by visiting thetarotdiagnosis.com.